I enjoyed your song, by the way.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'd like to deal with the question, is God male or female? In an age where gender issues are starting to become so important, where political correctness in terms of gender neutrality is so important, it's worth pondering. When sometimes you hear God spoken of in the female in very politically correct circles that are usually non-orthodox, is there any substance to this? I mean, a friend sent me a prayer recited entirely in the feminine, where Hashem was being referred to. I think it was the Amidah in the feminine, and instead of talking about Hashem, it was, every word had been translated. Is there any value to that? Does that bring God closer to women? Does it alienate her from men? So it's worth kind of exploring Hashem's gender precisely. But before I get there, let's talk about tonight and tomorrow's date, and let's see if we can get it all together. Today was the 24th of Elul. Tonight and tomorrow is the 25th of Elul, and that is the anniversary of the creation of the world. So let me just try and show that to you graphically. There we go. So if we have here creation of the world on Thursday, tomorrow, that's the 25th of Elul. The 26th would be here. That's the day when there was a separation between the firmament, the waters above, the waters below. Vegetation appearing on day 3. Dry land appearing on day 3 rather, which would then be Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. Sunday would be day 4. I'm just going by this week. So day 1, day 2, day 3, 25th, 26th, 27th. 28th of Elul will be the 4th day of creation. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 would be the 5th day, or 29th of Elul would be when there were fish and birds. And then the 6th day of creation would be the 1st of Tishrei, that which we refer to as Rosh Hashanah. So if we take it, for example, this year, tomorrow is Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, and of course on Tuesday we're in shul listening to the shofar and the chazan and so forth. So that's the sequence of the next week. So this week ahead represents the 6 days of creation. The source for saying that creation actually happened on the 25th of Elul is Rabbi Eliezer, who teaches us this in the Medrash Rabbah, Vayikra Rabbah, and he tells us that on the 25th of Elul, the world was created. So that would begin that process of 6 days of creation. Here's an interesting one. If you look in your Machzah, there are a number of quotations which suggest that the creation of the world is actually Rosh Hashanah, that they would traditionally relate to as the day of the creation of the world. The phrase Hayom Harat Olam, today is the birth of the world, and that comes from the words that are said every time we blow a shofar, and at the end of shofar we say the words Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Yom HaMishpat, Koyotze Elamim. Usually it's sung by everyone together. Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Yamid Bamishpat. On this day, the world came into being. So that seems to be incorrect if we follow that view of the Medrash, which says that it was created 6 days earlier. The other phrase that features in the Machzah, Ze Hayom Tchilat Ma'asecha. That one isn't so prominent, but it's tucked away in the middle of the prayers of the day, when it talks about the day of Rosh Hashanah being the beginning of your work a memorial of the first day. First day of what? First day was 5 days earlier. How do we understand that? So the traditional answer is that on that day, man was created. Day 6 of creation was the day when Adam and Eve were brought into the world. And that is why we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, or in fact, the beginning of the world on that day. And we need to understand what that's all about. Yes, man is definitely the culmination of creation, the most important sorry, just some technical issues here, which are fixed. The most important part of creation, the ultimate creature in creation. And yes, that's why God prepared everything else and then man came at the very end. But how can you say it's the beginning of everything on that day? So let's perhaps look a little bit in detail at how man was created. And we know the story. We accept it, but kind of maybe let's do a what if. So this is what happens. Initially, and let's just pull those verses up in front of us once again. Initially, there is just man alone. And Hashem says, no, man shouldn't be alone. I'm going to make him an Ezer Kenegdo. I'd like you to remember those words. We may come back to them. Ezer is a helper, and Kenegdo means facing him, across him. So we translate it as a fitting helper for him, one that is appropriate for him, but actually Keneged means across from him. And then what happens is that we all know Hashem puts first man Adam to sleep, and he takes, and we normally translate this word mitzal otav as one of his ribs, closed it up, and then we have a woman, an isha, which is a tzela asher lakach, the rib that he had taken. Does a rib make a woman? Let's look at what Rashi actually tells us about this rib. Rashi tells us that mitzal otav, of his ribs, the actual word tzela, singular, means his sides. And he proves that from the verse in Exodus, the tzela hamishkan, for the other side of the tabernacle. So the tabernacle, was comprised of several sides, and it talks about the tzelaot, or the two sides of the two halves. And this is bearing of what the sages say in the Talmud. They were created with two faces. So if we go back here, we look at it, it makes far more sense. The Talmud tells us, not like the tale, there is a view that it was actually a rib, and God created, fashioned man. That was a form of cloning, first instance of cloning. But the principal opinion seems to be that human was made up of female and male as one. I don't know if it was back to back or side by side, the Siamese twins kind of situation. And then Hashem says, no, that's man alone. And he then separates the two sides. And this is why he closed up the flesh at that spot and makes them into separate beings. And the rib that he had taken is actually the side that he had taken. And this is now where we have two separate individuals. So it would appear that man began as a single entity, human began as a single entity, and immediately Hashem said, no, that's not how it's going to work. They're going to be separated, and now they can face each other. Can you imagine the world if this had never happened? If man was a bigender, a genderless creature that could reproduce on his own, that had different features. There was the male face and the female face, or whatever it is, but it was one person. I mean, stand-up comedians would be out of work. What would we laugh about if not about the relationship between men and women? And that book would never have been written, about men from Mars and women from Venus. But never mind. The world will be very different. There'll be there wouldn't be books on romance. that there wouldn't be movies. What would rabbis sermonize about? It just would be a totally different world if it wasn't comprised of two different genders. Maybe there would be less strife, but would it be a better world? What did Hashem say? I'm going to make Ezer Kenegdo. It's going to be across from him, and it's going to be his helpmate. The Gemara says immediately, what do you mean Ezer Kenegdo? Which is it? Is it a helper or is it an opponent? And the Talmud says, well, it depends. Depends on the kind of marriage that they're married to have. Man and woman can be greatest opponents, greatest foes, or they can end up building an amazing partnership together. The operative word is that what men and women can create with the tension that exists between them, because a couple, they're different. They're not the same. And creativity is created through tension. So I'm not just talking about procreation, but even creativity, creation in general. When you draw a painting, you use colors, but there's the limitations of the medium and the imagination, and the two struggle together, and the end result is a piece of art. If you are writing, you use words. Words are limiting. Your thoughts are way out there, and the tension created by words, versus thoughts creates, if you're gifted, a piece of beautiful writing. When you give a speech, give a shiur, give a lecture, there is a tension between speaker and audience. Funny, just last Friday, my Shabbos newsletter to the community, I wrote about preparing sermons. And what's the art of preparing a sermon? Balancing, as I wrote there, what you think the community needs to hear and what they want to hear. And they're not always the same. And there's a tension. And that's why writing a sermon, delivering a drosha, there's an art to. It's a creative kind of activity. So creativity is enhanced by the tension that's pulling in slightly different directions, and the friction creates the final product. And likewise, when Hashem put man to the world, to improve the world, to guard it and to work it and to improve it, and not to leave it the way it was, that was best accomplished by men and women acting in tandem, but not always in absolute harmony. And the synthesis and the synergy created is what has made the world what it is today. And that's why Hashem talks about Vayu lebasar echad. They now become one flesh. They can procreate and create other human beings. But if you think about it, interestingly, it's in previous cultures, where the role of the woman was a submissive one, and one where there was not enough expression, according to our current value system, the world stagnated. And there's been a parallel. It'll be interesting to kind of do these sociological studies, the role of the woman and in society, and progress and technology and culture advancing, as the roles not became less distinct, but as the role of the woman became less effaced and less, she's got to be, barefoot in the kitchen with the train, to she's got to go out there in the world. And I think South Africa is amazing in terms of what has been done here to include the role of women. But I'm not sure that the rest of the parallels, but we'll leave it as that. Maybe as the world is coming towards the end of its kind of history, with the role of humans having always been completed, maybe this is why we're getting to a stage. I'm not talking about the nonsense where we're going totally overboard with gender roles and no longer being assigned by God and so forth, but that's not what it's about. But the fact that there is no longer traditionally that distinction of what a man can do and a woman can do, but that there's form of expression is perhaps a move into the direction of the world fulfilling its ultimate role. Now, What did Hashem say? Let us make man in our image, and God created the man B'Tselem Elokim. So what do we have here? Do we have male or female God? And that maybe dip back into our Yontiv liturgy to see, how is God referred to in our davening. So on the one hand, we have Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu is undoubtedly male. It's a father. Malkeinu, our king, clearly that's a king, not a queen. So those are distinct male roles. We referred to the world before as Hayom Harat Olam. Literally, the word Harat means birth of. Men do not really give birth. So pregnancy, birth, that's a female image. So we have both dimensions. And so we talk about Hashem, usually in the masculine, but yes, we do have a concept of the Shekhinah, and the Shekhinah is a female word, and when we talk about the Shekhinah, we use female adjectives, and we refer to the Shekhinah, strictly speaking, as a she. There are different dimensions of Hashem. When God's always been, there's no beginning and end to God. But when a world had to come into being, God had to do, like he did with a man and woman, a separation, a cleavage between the essence of God, one which would never allow for creation. Because in the presence of the essence of God, the physical cannot and will not exist. Cannot come into form, never mind, will not survive, cannot come into being. Imagine having this, a little bit of cotton wool next to a huge flame. So a world cannot exist, the physical world cannot exist in the presence. What did Hashem do with something called tzimtzum? Tzimtzum means a contraction. So whereas God remained in what's called atzmut, or the essence of God, exactly as he always was, he divided off something which is called in Kabbalah Seder HaHishtalshelut, a whole order of sfirot and descents and worlds that bring the presence of Hashem to be more and more obscured and less visible. And that's Tzimtzum, and that's the Shekhinah. Shekhinah means to rest. It's the presence of God that can rest in this world. That Tzimtzum, that contraction of God, allowed for a world to be created. First spiritual worlds, and then going lower and lower and lower levels. You can look that up in various books of Kabbalah. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah. Names are not relevant. We're going from the essence of God, and now Hashem is contracting his perception of presence to the extent that when you get to this world here, there is a perception of total absence of God. I mean, look out the window. There's no absence, there's no presence of God being felt anywhere. You look around you and they're all various objects, but although maybe in theory that they're divinely animated, you're not seeing, you're not feeling any of that. And then God puts into this world human beings, and human beings are not inanimate objects. Human beings are endowed with what we would call today artificial intelligence. Hashem created us and allowed us to develop into free-thinking individuals. And you have something very strange in this world. You have atheists in this world. Those are humans who deny the existence of God. Hashem created a world in which it's possible to even not just not notice his presence, but know it exists, but even deny his presence totally and completely. Now, make no mistake, it's not that God has left this world. It's entirely and completely in our perception, and hence this verse that is in our davening, said in the Shachrit, in the preliminaries that people kind of rush off or usually come too late for, where he talks about God existed before the world was created, and now the world has been created in the same way. Atahu, you are the same God before the world. Atahu, you are the same God after it was created. So there's no change in God. The change is simply and purely in our own personal perception from the world point of view of a feeling of absence of Hashem. Now, in Hashem's Tetragrammaton, or the four-letter name of Hashem, the first two letters, Yud and K, refer to the essence of God. The second two letters, the latter two letters, Vav and Hey at the end, those refer to Tzimtzum. So we have the male and the female parts of God, so to speak. Why did Hashem do that? Why not remain in his essence? Why create that cleavage? Why separate the male and the female dimensions of God? Because Hashem created a world in order for his essence to be revealed in the world that is alien to him. And that's why he took it to the absolute lowest level of creating a world that can deny the existence of God and making creatures, humans that can deny it. And those humans, because they're endowed with that kind of intelligence and free choice, which the rest of creation doesn't have. Inanimate doesn't have free choice, and the animals don't have free choice, and the vegetable world, and even angels don't have free choice. Humans have free choice. Therefore, they have the ability to deny God, but they also have the ability to discover and to reveal God. And that's what the world's all about. How do we uncover the presence of Hashem in this world? The mitzvot do that. The mitzvot create that bond, that connection between the divine and the world. When you put on tefillin, you are taking leather straps, parchment scrolls, leather boxes, tying them in the prescribed way, and creating a magic that I'm going to name in a moment. Creating a magic of bringing the divine into the world. Every mitzvah, whether it's an act of charity, whether it's putting on tefillin, whether it's eating kosher, whether it's a positive mitzvah, all the 248 obligations that we have, or a prohibition, a negative mitzvah, the 365 prohibitions that we're precluded from engaging in, each of those brings divinity, brings godliness into the world. Successively, gradually, but every mitzvah that we do brings more of that holiness into the world, and that's what Hashem created this world for, and that's why he put us in this world. That's why he gave us the mitzvot as channels to be able to bring God into the world and make this world divine from a world. In Kabbalistic terms, it's called Dira B'Tachtonim, or a dwelling place down here below that is Hashem. In this world, which would seem to be alien to him, he's created a situation where we can transform the world into his home. Only we can. Only humans can. Now, have a peek in your siddur, and I'm going to pull up one section here, and an introduction that is printed in the siddur. Maybe some people say it, I don't know, before the observance of some mitzvot, not all. Okay, but when a mitzvah is performed, the following is recited just before. Not this, but that. Before we do a mitzvah, we say, we do this mitzvah, L'shem Yuchud, Kutsha Brichu Ushchinte, for the sake of the unification of the Holy One, blessed is he, and his divine presence. Shchinte, that's because this is kind of half an Aramaic. So it's a Shechina. It's God and the Shechina. And the mitzvah we're about to do is done for the purpose of Yichud, of unifying the Holy One and the Shechina, unifying the male and female dimensions of Hashem, creating intimacy between the two components of Hashem that he separated. We do this with fear and love and fear. I don't know why that's translated twice, but whatever. And what do we do this for? To unite those names of Hashem. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. The name Yud Hey and Vav Hey have to be unified. So what did God do? God created the cleavage. God separated the male and the female. dimensions of Hashem, and we have to bring it together again. And the mitzvot are there to do precisely that. The mitzvot are there to create Hashem's marriage between the two halves, between the two parts. That is, and this is said in your Siddur. You'll find this before Tefillin, before Tehillah, before Shema, in some Siddurim, and the Sephardi Siddurim. You have it many, many times before many mitzvot. Ashkenaz does it less often. In some Hasidic communities, it is done, many, many times. In our Siddur, you will find it most definitely just before Baruch She'amar. And in fact, that's a prevailing custom among Ashkenazi Jews, is to say it once a day, and that is for all the mitzvot you perform. They're all there to create the unification of the Holy One, blessed is He, and His divine presence. And that's what our goal here in the world is all about. And this is why the world begins when we come in. Because the purpose of this creation was for Hashem to separate the dimensions in order to create that tension that can bring about a world that used to be, and still is sadly, alien to God and can be made into a home for God. Now, where are we heading? Where are we heading? As I said earlier, we're heading towards the end of history. Why? Because when enough of us do enough mitzvot, enough times, for long enough, then eventually we transform the whole world into being ready to be a home for God. The purpose of creation is then fulfilled. And that is when we have united, married, Kudsha Brichu, the male dimension of God, with the female dimension of God. Who can make this happen? Only humans, only us. And Hashem created humans on Rosh Hashanah. And that's why it's Tchilat Maasecha. That's why it's the beginning. Angels couldn't do it, and nothing else in creation can affect that kind of a unity. You need to be endowed with free choice, free will, a Yetzer Hara, which Hashem put in us to give us that balance, of having the option of being an atheist, of having the option of denying the existence of Hashem to some level or other, and yet reaching faith. And that's the beginning of the history of a people. Where do we come from? Avram Avinu, where are his origins? His father, an idolater. Avram Avinu starts, Rambam describes this in detail, looking around him all over, and he says, this didn't come here by itself. There's got to be, but it wasn't there before. He came to it. He realized it. And then he taught his children this, who taught their children, and this is us. We come from a world in which Hashem is totally absent and can be denied into getting it all together. At the end of our prayers 3 times a day, we recite this verse that tells us what will be when we reach the end of history. It'll be by Yom HaHu Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. We're going to unite Hashem all over once again. In other words, a division that existed until now between male and female dimensions is going to come together again. And the hidden parts of God, or the parts of God where he hid himself, and the parts of God that remained unhidden all along, what's called Atzmut, the essence of God, are going to become one, because there won't be any distinction. But then the world will have truly been transformed by all of us. That's Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is when we recommit to that mission. Rosh Hashanah is when we talk about building the kingship of God, because the power of a king in this context is made by the subject accepting him. And this is what we do in Rosh Hashanah, the mention of the creation of the world, of the birth of the world, at the same time talking about God as Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Please God, may this be the year, and there's still 6 days before, so it can still be the year 5781, where the end of history is reached, because we have fulfilled the destiny of man that began on 1 Tishrei in the year 1. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break for the next 3 Wednesdays, 1, 2, 3, 4 Wednesdays, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, we have Yom Tovim, but unfortunately no Shiurim. And we'll resume the Wednesday after Simchas Torah. So I wish you all a good year. May this be a year of blessing and reveal good and only good things.